for the United States of America. So I am not at all surprised that this, perhaps passed through Ed Martin's pardon office and landed on Donald Trump's desk. But, Brian, it really is pretty despicable and completely indefensible. I mean, these people who basically were reality TV stars just for living an opulent lifestyle, a lifestyle that we now know, courtesy of a jury's verdict, was a product, at least in part, of fraud, rampant fraud. They ended up being indicted for and convicted of conspiracy, bank fraud to the tune of $30 million, tax evasion. This was a several years long investigation. For anybody scoring at home, they were first indicted in August 2019. And by my calculations, that would mean they were indicted by Donald Trump's Department of Justice. I'm just saying. And then they went to trial. They were convicted by a jury of their peers. They were sentenced by the judge, Todd Chrisley to 12 years, Julie Chrisley to 7 years, and they were ordered to repay $17.8 million in fines and penalties and restitution. So, these are not exactly salt of the earth people. And then perhaps most importantly, this case went all the way through the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. And whereas the Court of Appeals did order the trial court judge to do a minimal sentencing recalculation for Julie Chrisley, the three-judge panel affirmed their convictions. So we can say definitively they committed these crimes, they were convicted of these crimes, they lost on appeal, and yet Donald Trump now pardons them for all of these horrific financial crimes.
I'm trying to figure out what the upside for Trump to engage in this is, other than just he doesn't care, and so these people are multimillionaires just like him, and he views anybody being held accountable for their crimes as kind of a personal affront, and so that's why he did it. But just trying to give, and I know this is a fool's errand here, but trying to give the benefit of the doubt and figure out if there was any validity to what he was saying, that it was that this was a harsh sentence. Do you find that this was in any way an unusual sentence or a harsh sentence given the crimes that they engaged in?
No, Brian, that's precisely what the federal sentencing guidelines are for. Congress actually sets out in sentencing guidelines the range of permissible sentences that a judge can impose for any convictions at trial. So presumably this judge followed those voluntary sentencing guidelines. But, when you look at some of what they did, Brian, not only did they, engage in this rampant multi-million-dollar bank fraud where they were providing false documents and false information to secure $30 million in bank loans, they were also just kind of rubbing it in everyone's face. For example, while they were failing to file tax returns, Todd Chrisley was going on various programs bragging about how they paid $750,000 to $1 million in federal taxes each year. Or we can talk about some of what Julie Chrisley did. She actually created a false document and provided it to the grand jury in accordance with a subpoena that she received for information. And she generated that false document to try to cover up her underlying crimes. And then there's this little nugget, in case you're not already offended enough by their conduct. While her husband was in bankruptcy proceedings, Julie Chrisley created false financial documents to rent a home in Los Angeles. And once they were living in the home, they failed to pay rent. And the property owner had to move to have them evicted. I mean, this was like in-your-face fraud and corruption. Now, where do we see others who have engaged in submitting false information to banks to secure loans, engaging in tax evasion, filing for bankruptcy? Well, it sounds a little bit like the person that pardoned them.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. Glenn, I fear I know the answer to this question, but now that Donald Trump has issued this pardon, is there any appeal to this pardon? Is there any way that prosecutors could try to stop this? Or is the pardon power plenary? And so if he wants to pardon every single white-collar criminal in the United States of America, he really has carte blanche to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think, Brian, every aspect of answering that question is bad news on the justice front. First of all, can't prosecutors do anything about it? Well, who are the prosecutors? Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche and Emil Bove, Donald Trump's former defense attorneys and current high DOJ officials. They're not going to do a damn thing about a Donald Trump pardon. Can a presidential pardon be challenged? It doesn't seem so, given what the Supreme Court has said about the sanctity of a president's core constitutional powers, like the pardon power. So I don't think there is any lawful vehicle that can be deployed to try to undo what Donald Trump has done. But what is he doing? He is encouraging and inspiring white-collar crime, criminal fraud, tax evasion, right? That's what he's doing. That's the message he is sending. You know what? You want to see more bank robberies in the United States of America? Start pardoning all the bank robbers. Right. So this really does feel like Donald Trump's nefarious attempt and determination to build the American oligarchy, where the only thing that matters is money. Doesn't matter how you acquired it, lawfully or unlawfully. In fact, if it's unlawful, all the better. You can avoid paying taxes and you can still enjoy a presidential pardon. I wish there was some point of light that I could find on this front, but I don't see any.
No, and I think that kind of is the point unto itself, is that we have seen so many instances where Donald Trump had promised his supporters during the campaign that he understood their pain, that he was going to get into office and work for them. And he talked about the price of eggs and the price of housing and the price of rent and the price of groceries and the price of gas. And then he comes into office, and the first thing he does is instigate a trade war that sends the cost of everything surging because of this bizarre notion that he's going to reshore all of these manufacturing jobs when manufacturing has been declining for the better part of a century. Then he decides to engage in just overt corruption on top of that, where he doubles his net worth because of his cryptocurrency ventures, accepts a $400 million jet that Republicans would be losing their skulls over if Barack Obama or Joe Biden did the same thing. He goes to these Gulf states where he's now also opening up hotels in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and also Qatar. And so we're just seeing so many instances where Donald Trump had promised on the campaign trail that he would focus on regular people, and yet the only thing he's actually done with his political capital in office is to help people like him, people who are the ultra wealthy in this country, or people who are just outright criminals in this country who he sees himself in. And so instead of lifting a finger to help any of the people that he promised he would help on the campaign trail back when he was trying to manipulate them for their votes, now that he's actually got power, he's not focused on regular working class Americans. Instead, far from it, he is making costs higher for working class Americans. He's stripping Medicaid away from tens of millions of working class Americans. He's stripping $300 million in food assistance away from working class Americans. And so any way you cut it, this guy has focused not on any of the people who he had to promise the sun and the earth for their votes. Instead, he's just helping people like him. He's helping people in his own tax bracket. He's helping people who he sees himself in because they're the same people who had to deal with the criminal justice system in very much the same way that he did. And so I hope that, if for nothing else, the change that we get right now is that all of those Trump voters out there who maybe they're diehard MAGA, maybe they're just independents or disaffected liberals even, who were upset with the status quo and believed him when he said that he would help them. Look, we've seen this before, where Trump promises the sun and the moon to everybody who's out there in the public. He did it in his first term, where he promised that we would see an infrastructure law that never materialized. He promised that they would see a healthcare plan that was cheaper and more comprehensive that never materialized. Promised we would see a middle-class tax cut that never materialized. A manufacturing renaissance that never materialized. A jobs boom that never materialized. So he's been here before, where he's gone on this whole populist shtick to try and get everybody's votes. But I hope that people recognize now that it's not just one time in office, but 2 times in office, where the only thing he expends his political capital on is are tax laws that will benefit people in the top 1/2 of 1% of the population. And that's what he's doing right here. So look, there is no way to cut what